Hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. Only a few seconds younger than the Big Bang itself. Today, hydrogen plays a central role in our global energy systems. It fuels heavy industry, and without it, shipping and air travel would have long disappeared. But although it might seem like an obvious choice to us now, things were not always this way. The years between the industrial and decarbonizing revolutions are regarded to be some of the darkest in human history, plagued with environmental degradation, economic inequalities, and social upheavals. Unprecedented economic growth was the order of the day, at the expense of climate stability, clean air, and countless ecosystems. Rising sea levels swallowed coastlines, while devastating storms, droughts, and wildfires became routine, forcing millions to flee their homes. Pollution choked the cities, and the relentless extraction of resources strained both nature and society, sparking conflicts over diminishing water, land, and energy. Public outcry and youth movement surged, as trust in governments and corporations wavered. This turbulent period marked humanity's painful but determined journey towards the sustainable, decarbonized world we live in today. We have come to view the people of that time as advocates of a short-sighted, consumer-driven, and individualistic world. But this perception is not entirely fair. They were not all like that. In this series, we uncover some of the many brilliant and forward-thinking minds who played their part in pulling humanity away from the precipice. Let's spin back. The year is 2024. Brunel University, on the outskirts of London, in the Confederation of Britain, which, prior to its deunification, was known as the United Kingdom. It took many years of research and overcoming obstacles before hydrogen was embedded in our energy networks, and the people we are about to meet are all working in some capacity on developing hydrogen production and application.
My name is Xingyan Wang.
My name is Ioana Pisica.
Dr. Princewell Ibeka.
Avril Horton.
My name is Dr. Miles Worsley.
I always wanted to be a scientist.
Every day is different.
I've always wanted to be someone who solves problems.
I research and I teach in power engineering.
Research and the development of hydrogen combustion engine.
So the researchers talk about technical stuff and the companies talk about commercial stuff, and I have to hold them together and to interpret and translate and find a common way forward.
Splitting water to produce hydrogen and oxygen.
Emitting zero carbon and other pollutants.
So you need catalysts to do that, and my work was to improve existing catalysts to bring down costs.
New ways of managing the power grid to include new technologies like electric vehicles.
My research, what I'm looking at is rather than producing hydrocarbon from reservoirs, I produce hydrogen from them.
The electricity demand and also new types of generation like renewable energy.
At this time, there was a heavy reliance on fossil fuels, dirty energy sources, which came from the remains of ancient plants and animals that were buried and, over time, turned into oil, coal, or natural gas. When burned, they released energy, but they also emitted carbon. Few people will ever have encountered fossil fuels in today's society, but the transition away from them was long and difficult. Hydrogen offered solutions to many of the problems preventing the transition and was a key component in the decarbonising revolution.
It's just part of a bigger picture.
I think hydrogen must have a role in the future if we wanted to move away from fossil fuels to renewable fuels.
The UK government and governments all around the world are setting targets for net zero, and hydrogen is a key component in that net zero target.
Hydrogen will be one of the energy vectors that will help us move the world.
It will help us make better use of renewably generated electricity.
Energy that otherwise would be lost.
If we produce a lot of a surplus and we can store them in the form of hydrogen, then these hydrogen can be used in wide sectors, for example, transportation.
There's also an opportunity to use it directly in place of petrol and diesel.
Currently use batteries a lot. Fuels like hydrogen, they have much higher energy density, so they could be used to store energy during the downtime for things like wind and solar power.
When you burn hydrogen, you don't produce any carbon dioxide. You effectively produce water, yes.
But not all means of hydrogen production were created equal.
We colour code depending on where we source the hydrogen. Grey hydrogen is the dirtiest form of hydrogen, and where we get most of our hydrogen currently. We take natural gas and we break it down into hydrogen and whatever's left, which is often CO2, which then brings us to blue hydrogen, which is the same process, but where we capture the CO2. Then there's green hydrogen. This is the one we really like, because this is from the electrolysis of water. Two components, hydrogen and oxygen. It doesn't produce any CO2, but is also the most expensive and what we're trying to improve on.
Today, we only use green hydrogen.
Let's generate some hydrogen. This is electrolysis, putting an electric current through some water. And our power source is a battery, and I'm going to use 2 pencils. So I'm going to connect these. When I put them into the water, it'll make an electric circuit through the salty water. You may be able to see now that we have bubbles. The formula for water is H2O. H is hydrogen, O is oxygen. It's H2 because there are 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. So the one that's got more bubbles is the hydrogen, and the one that's got less bubbles is the oxygen. So what you're seeing there is electrolysis, production of green hydrogen.
When we have hydrogen as a fuel for combustion engines, obviously the only product will be water. Water can be electrolyzed into hydrogen plus oxygen, so it's like a circular economy. So when we have abundant renewable energy or electricity, we can make use of them to enable this circle. Then we can be a truly net zero society or hydrogen economy.
So why did it take so long?
I think a lot of people fear hydrogen.
If you speak to somebody about hydrogen who has never heard anything, the only thing they have heard is the airship that blew up. So, it goes bang, doesn't it?
She's referring to the Hindenburg tragedy of 1937.
The way something could go wrong is always there in every technology and every source of energy.
But fear wasn't the only thing slowing down progress. Even with the threat of irreversible climate change looming heavy, governments of the day were dragging their feet when it came to progressing sustainable technologies.
We need not just funding, we also need to attract the brightest minds to come and investigate this problem.
We don't have a lot of infrastructure for hydrogen production, distribution, and storage. I think that's the first hurdle.
Create policies, create systems that will allow investors to invest in infrastructures.
And secondly, the regulation. For example, for transportation, we don't have very clear regulations.
And there was another key factor standing in the way.
We are not yet in a critical position where we really need to get rid of all the fossil fuels. So we are still relying on gas. We can still rely on it for a few years more. So it's not a pressing matter at the moment.
As we all know, it was to become a matter of high urgency in a very short space of time. After the world-changing events of 2028, and with policymakers at last on the same page about the importance of investing in a sustainable future, progress could be made in earnest. Crucial lessons were learned, and attitudes towards energy usage were shifted at all levels of society.
We have to understand that energy is not a right, it's a benefit of the society.
It's people as well as the technology and the infrastructure.
It's difficult now for us to grasp just how close we came to the brink of extinction. And it was thanks to the collective efforts of many minds working optimistically in the face of adversity that we are still standing, in a world built on resilience, equity, and the hard-won lessons of an era on the brink of collapse.
We don't know what the future will be.
It would be great if I could know now the solutions you are using.
I hope we've not screwed up this present.
As a generation, we are trying our best.
There are people who genuinely want to make a difference.
Future generations and the next one.
Hopefully, you have seen a greener Earth.
That is livable, that is healthy.
Let's just go for it.
On tomorrow's Not All Humans, we take a look at the late 21st century's de-digitization movement, otherwise known as the analog renaissance, and investigate how the loss of so much important footage from the 22nd century has impacted our perception of history.